Xenia sat alone in the quiet room, staring out of the large window. The soft light from the twin moons outside bathed the room in a gentle glow, but her heart felt heavy. It had been weeks since the last public meeting, and the words from that day still echoed in her mind. Her world, Azaria, was known for its advanced technology and peaceful ways. But there was one thing that set their society apart from others: fertility. The people of Azaria placed great importance on reproduction. A person's value was often determined by their ability to produce offspring, and the more children one had, the greater their status. Xenia had never been able to have children. It wasn't because she didn't want to. She dreamed of having a family, but the scientists on her planet had tested her and declared her infertile. It wasn't something that could be fixed. They said she was simply broken. She had tried to keep her head up, to continue living her life, but it was impossible to escape the shame. Everywhere she went, she felt like an outsider. People spoke to her with pity, or worse, ignored her completely. She had no family to turn to, no friends to lean on. Her once promising career in science had been her only escape, but even that had been tainted. Most people in her field looked at her with doubt. After all, how could someone who couldn't create life contribute meaningfully to a world that valued it so highly? Xenia had tried to ignore it. She threw herself into her work, hoping to find a purpose in the stars. She had discovered many advancements in technology that helped her people, but nothing could erase the feeling that she was less than everyone else. She had always been a logical person, relying on facts and reason, but when it came to this, her emotions couldn't be shut out. Her thoughts were interrupted when the door to the room opened. A tall figure stepped inside, wearing the uniform of a human soldier. Xenia had seen humans before. Many had come to Azaria to assist with various projects. But this one was different. His presence was commanding yet calm. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, she felt like she wasn't invisible. "Dr. Xenia, right?" the man asked, his voice deep and steady. "I'm Captain Darius Stone. I've heard a lot about your work." Xenia blinked, surprised. Humans were known for their boldness, but few had ever taken the time to speak to her beyond what was necessary for their projects. She nodded, feeling a little flustered. "Yes, I'm Xenia. What can I do for you, Captain Stone?" "I've been assigned to work with you on the interspecies communication project. I've read your research on neural networks and thought you might be able to help us. The mission we're preparing for is crucial to the peace talks, and your input would be invaluable," he said. Xenia felt a small spark of interest. It wasn't often that anyone asked for her help. Most of the time, they simply used her work and moved on. But there was something different about this soldier. His tone was respectful, as if he truly believed in her abilities. "Well, I'm happy to assist in any way I can," she said, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions she was feeling. She had learned to keep her emotions hidden behind a wall, but there was something about Captain Stone that made her feel seen. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like an outsider. They spent the next few hours working together, discussing the project in great detail. Darius was intelligent, but he was also patient and kind. He listened to her ideas, asked insightful questions, and even took notes on her suggestions. As they worked, Xenia found herself growing more comfortable in his presence. It was a strange feeling. She was used to people judging her, but Darius didn't seem to care about her past, about the fact that she was infertile. It was refreshing. At the end of the day, they stood together in the lab, reviewing their progress. "You've got an incredible mind," Darius said with a smile. "I'm glad to have you on this mission." Xenia hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Was he just being polite, or did he truly mean it? She had never been good at reading people. Most of the time, she could only tell when someone was trying to hide their judgment behind a smile. But Darius wasn't like that. His words seemed genuine. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I appreciate your kind words." "You've earned them," he replied. "I know this project is important, but I also know it's not easy for you. The work you're doing is helping more than just our species. It's helping all of us." His voice softened as he continued. "And I can see that you're more than just your work. You're a person, Xenia. A valuable one." Xenia felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She wasn't sure what it meant yet, but it felt like a small weight had been lifted off her shoulders. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely alone. As Darius left the room, Xenia stayed behind, staring at the data on her screen. But her mind was no longer focused on the numbers and equations. She thought about his words. Could it be possible? Could someone actually see her for who she was and not just what she wasn't? For the first time in years, Xenia allowed herself to hope. The next few days passed quickly, and Xenia found herself thinking about Captain Darius Stone more often than she cared to admit. Their initial meeting had been a pleasant surprise, and working alongside him had been a refreshing change. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so respected. Darius's approach was different from the others. While many of her colleagues spoke to her as if she were a lesser being, Darius treated her like an equal. He took her ideas seriously, and he didn't look at her with the pity she had grown accustomed to. For once, she wasn't just the infertile alien who couldn't give her species children. She was Xenia, a brilliant scientist with valuable insights. The next meeting between them took place in a large conference room filled with representatives from various species. This was part of a special gathering designed to discuss the next steps in their interspecies communication project. There were representatives from many different species, but Xenia felt out of place as always. Even though she had contributed greatly to the project, she was rarely acknowledged in such public settings. Xenia entered the room, feeling the usual tension in the air. The atmosphere was tense, as everyone was waiting for the meeting to begin. People from various species were chattering in their own languages, some barely noticing her presence. It was the same routine. She was invisible to most of them. But as she took her seat, she noticed Darius standing by the window, scanning the room with a focused expression. When he saw her enter, a small warm smile spread across his face. He nodded at her, acknowledging her presence. Xenia quickly looked away, feeling her face grow warm. She didn't like that people were starting to notice her. The more attention she received, the more she feared they might judge her. But Darius's smile made her feel strangely at ease. After everyone had gathered, the meeting began. Representatives from different planets presented their ideas and concerns about the project. As usual, Xenia sat quietly, listening to the discussions. She was used to being in the background, and it suited her. But every time her eyes drifted toward Darius, she couldn't help but notice how he listened intently, how he respected everyone's opinion. He wasn't just here for his own gain. He genuinely cared about the success of the mission. When it was finally her turn to speak, Xenia felt a knot form in her stomach. She stood up, taking a deep breath. The room seemed to grow quieter as everyone's eyes turned to her. She could feel their gaze, some curious, some judgmental. The fear of being rejected surged within her, but she fought to push it down. She couldn't let her insecurities hold her back. "Today, I would like to discuss the new communication algorithms I have developed," she began, her voice steady, but not without a hint of nerves. "These algorithms have been designed to adapt to the neural patterns of different species, allowing for a more seamless exchange of information. It is still a work in progress, but it holds great promise." She paused, her eyes scanning the room, noticing the skeptical looks from some of the alien representatives. She could tell they weren't impressed. Some had already dismissed her ideas simply because of her reputation. They saw her as a scientist, yes, but a broken one, someone who couldn't be fully trusted. But then, to her surprise, Darius spoke up. "I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Xenia on this project, and I can vouch for her brilliance. The work she's doing is groundbreaking, and I believe it will be a key factor in bringing us closer to the peace we all want." Xenia blinked, shocked by his words. She hadn't expected him to speak up for her in front of such a large group. His support made her heart race, and for a moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. One of the alien representatives raised an eyebrow and asked, "But are we sure these algorithms are reliable? We cannot afford to make mistakes when dealing with such delicate matters." Darius's expression didn't waver. "That's why we're here. We're testing the algorithms in real time, analyzing how they work with various species. This is a collaborative effort, and we believe Dr. Xenia's research will provide the necessary solutions." Xenia was taken aback. No one had ever defended her like this before. It was more than just a simple endorsement. Darius had spoken with conviction. It made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she was worth something more than she had believed. After the meeting ended, Xenia found herself walking beside Darius down the long hallways of the research facility. The silence between them was comfortable, not awkward like it usually was with others. It was as though they had reached an unspoken understanding. Darius's presence didn't make her feel small, nor did it make her feel like she had to hide who she was. "Thank you," Xenia said quietly, breaking the silence, "for speaking up for me today. I wasn't expecting that." Darius glanced at her and smiled. "You didn't need to expect it. You've earned it. Your work speaks for itself." Xenia felt a warmth spread through her chest. She wasn't used to receiving such praise. It was one thing for her to believe in her own abilities, but to have someone else see them too. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. As they continued walking, Darius suddenly asked, "If you don't mind me asking, Xenia, how do you manage to keep going? Despite everything that's happened with your people, and the way they view you." Xenia hesitated. She hadn't really talked about it with anyone before, but something in Darius's gentle tone made her want to share. "It's hard," she said softly. "It's hard when people look at you and only see your flaws. But I've learned to keep going because I know I have something valuable to give. I just have to prove it to myself, not to anyone else." Darius nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You've already proven it," he said simply. Xenia felt a lump form in her throat. No one had ever said that to her before, not in such a straightforward, honest way. "Thank you, Darius," she whispered. "You have no idea how much your words mean to me." He smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Xenia felt like she didn't have to hide her true self. Maybe there was hope after all. The days following the meeting were filled with more collaboration between Xenia and Captain Darius Stone. As they worked side by side on the interspecies communication project, Xenia found herself opening up more, not just about the work, but also about her past and her struggles. There was something about Darius that made her feel safe, like she could be herself without fear of judgment. Each day, they spent hours together in the lab, working on algorithms and testing new ideas. Darius was always attentive, asking insightful questions and pushing her to think errantly. "If I were like everyone else, able to have children, would I be more accepted? Would people see me as more than just a scientist?" Darius listened carefully, his expression softening. "I think you underestimate how much you bring to the table, Xenia. You're more than just your ability to have children. You're brilliant. You've already done things that no one else could have done. Your work will change the future." Xenia's heart fluttered at his words, but she couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that had settled within her. She had spent so many years fighting to prove her worth, to show that she was more than just her infertility. But in this society, it often felt like her worth would never be enough. No matter what she accomplished, she was always seen as incomplete. Darius seemed to understand the depth of her feelings, even without her saying much. He placed a hand on the table. "Tappins, I know we can make a difference." Xenia nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I think we already have." The days in the lab seemed to stretch endlessly as Xenia and Darius worked together. Their collaboration had deepened, and so had their connection. Every day they grew more comfortable with each other, sharing their thoughts and ideas freely. Xenia began to find herself looking forward to their time together, and not just for the work. It wasn't that she hadn't enjoyed her work before. She had always found satisfaction in the challenges of her research, in the breakthroughs that came after hours of testing and calculations. But with Darius, it felt different. There was a warmth, a sense of companionship that she hadn't known she needed. One afternoon, as they sat in the lab, reviewing their progress on the communication algorithms, Darius turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Xenia, we've come a long way since we started working together. But I feel like there's something more we can do. Something bigger." Xenia looked up from her notes, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Darius leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant for a moment as if he were considering the possibilities. "We've been focused on the technical side of things, on improving the communication between species. But what if we also worked on something that could bring people closer together on a personal level? Something that could help them see each other as more than just different species or cultures." Xenia's brow furrowed in thought. "You're talking about a way to bridge the emotional gap between species, not just the technical one." "Exactly," Darius said, his eyes lighting up. "We've been focused on language and data, but we haven't thought much about how people feel. What if we could create something that allowed them to understand each other on a deeper, more personal level? Something that could help people connect emotionally, not just intellectually." Xenia felt a spark of excitement at the idea. It was a challenge she had never considered before. Up until now, all her work had been about solving problems through logic and reason. But what if she could use her skills to help people understand each other in a way that went beyond words? It was a difficult task, but it was also the kind of challenge she loved. "I think it's a brilliant idea," she said after a moment. "But it's going to require a lot of research. We'd need to study the emotions of different species, how they express and interpret feelings. We'd need to create an entirely new approach." Darius smiled. "We've got the time, and we've got each other." Xenia's heart fluttered at his words, but she quickly pushed the thought away. It was easy to get lost in the moment, to think about the warmth of his smile and the way he looked at her, but she reminded herself that they were here to work. The project was important, and that was what she needed to focus on. Over the next few weeks, Xenia and Darius dove into this new aspect of the project. They studied the emotional expressions of different species, attempting to decode how feelings were communicated beyond just spoken language. It was challenging, especially since emotions varied so much between species. Some expressed their feelings through body language, while others used scent, color, or even sound. But Xenia was determined, and with Darius by her side, she felt like they could accomplish anything. One evening, as they sat in the lab, working late into the night, Darius looked over at Xenia. She was focused on a holographic display of emotional data from one of the alien species, her brow furrowed in concentration. For a moment, Darius just watched her, admiring the way she worked. There was a beauty in her determination, a quiet strength that he had come to admire. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day, about how you've always felt like you weren't enough, just because you couldn't have children. I think that's the way a lot of people feel in different ways, not just you. Like they're not enough because of something they can't control." Xenia looked up from her work, her expression softening as she met his gaze. "I never really thought of it that way." "Well, I think you're wrong about one thing," Darius said, his voice steady and kind. "You are more than enough. You've already done things that will change the future. You've already made a difference." Xenia felt a lump form in her throat at his words. It was strange how easily he could make her feel understood, seen in a way that no one else had ever made her feel before. "Thank you, Darius. That means more to me than you know." Darius smiled gently, his eyes warm. "I mean it. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're already doing what no one else can. You're changing the world, one step at a time." Xenia felt the weight of his words settle in her chest. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe them. Maybe she didn't need to be perfect. Maybe she didn't need to meet the expectations that society had placed on her. She was enough, just as she was. She had the ability to change the future, and she was already doing it. As they continued to work, The bond between them grew stronger. Xenia found herself relying on Darius in ways she hadn't expected. He was her rock, her support when the challenges felt overwhelming. And though she tried to keep her emotions in check, there were moments when she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to their connection than just the work. One evening, as they wrapped up their latest test of the emotional connection algorithms, Darius turned to her with a smile. "I think we're getting closer. The data looks promising." Xenia nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "We make a great team." Darius's expression softened, and he took a step closer to her. "Yes, we do." The air between them shifted, charged with a new energy. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their shared work and their growing connection hanging in the air. Xenia could feel her heart race, but she wasn't sure what to do with the feelings that were rising inside her. She had spent so many years hiding from her emotions, trying to protect herself from the hurt. But now, with Darius, it felt different. "Xenia," Darius said softly, his voice low and sincere. "I want you to know, you're not alone in this. I'll always be here, no matter what." And in that moment, Xenia realized that maybe she didn't have to face everything alone. Maybe, just maybe, she could let someone in. The days that followed were filled with a new sense of purpose. Xenia and Darius had successfully bridged the emotional gap between species, creating an algorithm that allowed for deeper understanding, not just in communication, but in feelings. The breakthrough was monumental. They had worked tirelessly, side by side, and their efforts were finally beginning to bear fruit. But despite their success, Xenia couldn't shake the feeling that something more was happening between her and Darius. She had always kept herself guarded, building walls around her heart to protect herself from the pain of rejection. But with Darius, it felt different. He made her feel seen, appreciated, and respected. It was an unfamiliar feeling for her, one that both frightened and excited her. One evening, after a particularly long day in the lab, Xenia found herself sitting outside the facility, staring up at the stars. The cool night air brushed against her skin, and the gentle hum of the colony in the distance provided a soothing background. She had always loved the stars. They reminded her that there was so much more to the universe than just the small world she had known. They made her feel hopeful. Darius appeared beside her, his footsteps soft on the ground. He had always been able to sense when she needed space, but tonight, he didn't want to give her that space. He wanted to be there for her. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice calm and warm. Xenia glanced at him, surprised to see him standing there, but she nodded. Of course. He sat beside her, both of them staring up at the vast sky above. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a comfort that had developed over the weeks. They didn't need words to fill the silence. Just being there together was enough. After a few moments, Darius spoke. "I've been thinking about everything we've done, and about how far we've come. You've made such a huge difference, Xenia. Not just in the project, but in my life too." Xenia turned to look at him, surprised by his words. She hadn't expected him to say anything like that. "What do you mean?" Darius met her gaze, his eyes soft yet full of conviction. "I mean, I've never met anyone like you. You've shown me a whole new perspective on things. I've always believed that the future was about war and conflict, that we had to fight for everything we wanted. But you've taught me that it's not just about fighting. It's about understanding, about working together. And you've made that possible." Xenia felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words, but she quickly looked away, trying to hide the emotions stirring inside her. "I didn't do it alone. We've done it together." Darius nodded, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. "Still, your mind, your heart, Xenia. Those are what made this possible. You don't give yourself enough credit." Xenia shook her head, feeling uncomfortable with the praise. She had always been the one to shy away from compliments, to downplay her achievements. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, let alone receiving such heartfelt recognition. She trailed off, unsure how to express the conflicting emotions inside her. I've always been told that I wasn't enough. That because I couldn't have children, I was somehow less than everyone else. And even now, when I've done something important, I still wonder if I'm enough. Darius reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. His touch was reassuring, warm. You are more than enough, Xenia. You've already proven that. And I don't think anyone who truly knows you could ever doubt that. She met his gaze again, her heart racing in her chest. There was sincerity in his eyes, a depth that made her feel vulnerable. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe him. Maybe she didn't need to be perfect. Maybe she didn't have to meet anyone's expectations. Maybe she could simply be herself. And that was enough. The silence between them felt different now, filled with something deeper. Xenia wasn't sure what it was, but it was there, hanging in the air between them. Her pulse quickened as she realized that what she had been feeling for Darius was more than just gratitude. There was something more, something that went beyond friendship. But before she could voice her thoughts, Darius spoke again, his tone serious. Xenia, I need to tell you something. She turned to face him, her heart beating faster. What is it? He took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. I've never met anyone like you. I know we've been working together, and I didn't want to complicate things, but I can't keep this to myself anymore. Xenia, I care about you, more than just as a colleague, more than just as a friend. Xenia's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding in her chest. She had heard those words before, from others, but never in the way Darius said them. There was something raw and honest in his voice that made her feel like he truly meant it. I care about you too, Darius, she whispered, the words escaping her before she could stop them. Darius smiled softly, his eyes filled with tenderness. I'm glad you do, because I think we could be something more than just partners in this project. I think we could be something more, Xenia, if you're willing to take that step with me. Xenia's heart was racing now, her thoughts swirling. She had spent so long hiding from the idea of love, afraid of the hurt it might bring. But here, in this moment, with Darius, she felt something shift. Maybe it was time to let go of her fears, to take a leap of faith. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I think I want to try. I think I'd want to take that step with you, Darius. His smile widened, and he gently took her hand in his. Then we'll take it one step at a time, together. And for the first time in a long time, Xenia felt the weight of her past begin to lift. With Darius by her side, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't broken. She was enough. And together, they would create a future that was full of possibility. The days after their conversation were filled with a new sense of closeness between Xenia and Darius. It was a quiet kind of connection, one that didn't need words to be understood. Their partnership, once purely professional, had begun to blossom into something deeper. It wasn't something they rushed into. Rather, it was a slow and gentle evolution, built on trust and mutual respect. Xenia still found herself wondering how this all could have happened. She had spent so many years keeping her distance from others, afraid of being hurt or rejected. But with Darius, she felt different. She felt safe. She felt understood. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe love wasn't something out of her reach. One evening, after another successful test of their emotional communication system, they stood together on the balcony of the research facility. The stars were bright above, just like the first night they had talked. The night air was cool, carrying the faint hum of the colony in the distance. It felt peaceful, almost surreal. Darius leaned against the railing, his eyes on the stars, while Xenia stood next to him, her arms crossed over her chest. For a long time, they both remained silent, enjoying the quiet. Finally, Darius spoke, his voice soft but full of emotion. I've been thinking a lot about our project, about everything we've accomplished. But more than that, I've been thinking about you, Xenia. Xenia turned her head to look at him, her heart fluttering in her chest. What do you mean? Darius looked at her, his gaze steady and kind. "I mean everything we've done together. It's been incredible. But what really matters to me now is you. I know we've been focused on the work, but I can't help but feel like I found something even more important than that." Xenia's breath caught in her throat. She had a feeling she knew what he was going to say, but hearing the words from him made her heart race. "Darius, He interrupted her softly, reaching out to gently take her hand. "Xenia, I don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for, but I need to be honest with you. I care about you more than I can put into words. You've changed my life, and I think I'm starting to realize just how much you mean to me." Xenia's heart thudded loudly in her chest. She had spent so long protecting herself, hiding behind her work, afraid to let anyone get too close. But Darius had been different. He had seen her for who she truly was, and he had never once made her feel less than enough. And now, standing here, with his hand holding hers, Xenia realized that she didn't want to push him away. "I care about you too, Darius," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "More than I ever thought possible." Darius's smile was warm, and he took a step closer, his hand gently brushing her cheek. "I'm glad to hear that, because I want to build something with you. Not just the project, but something real, something lasting. If you're willing to give it a chance." Xenia's mind raced. The idea of love, of being with someone, had always felt so out of reach for her. But with Darius, everything seemed so natural. The walls she had built around herself began to feel less necessary, as if she could let them down, little by little, without fear of being hurt. "Darius, She paused, unsure of what to say. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything, but I know I don't want to let you go. I want to try." Darius's eyes softened, and he smiled again, this time with a sense of relief. "We don't have to rush anything, Xenia. I'm not going anywhere. We'll take things one step at a time, together." And that was all Xenia needed to hear. In that moment, she realized that love wasn't something to be afraid of. It wasn't something that made her weaker or less capable. Instead, it was something that could make her stronger, something that could help her face the future with hope, not fear. Over the next few weeks, their relationship continued to grow, much like their work. They still spent countless hours in the lab, pushing the boundaries of what they could accomplish with their interspecies communication project. But now, they did it as a team, not just as colleagues, but as partners in every sense of the word. Their bond was undeniable. They worked together effortlessly, their ideas complementing each other in ways that made their research more dynamic than ever. But it wasn't just their professional partnership that thrived. It was their personal connection, too. They spent evenings talking about their hopes, their dreams, and their fears. They laughed over small things and comforted each other when the challenges of their work seemed overwhelming. Xenia found herself looking forward to every moment they spent together, not just because of the work they were doing, but because of the person Darius was, the person he made her feel she could be. One night, after a particularly long day in the lab, they sat together in the small lounge area, sipping warm drinks. Xenia's head rested on Darius's shoulder, her eyes half closed in exhaustion, but she felt a sense of peace she had never known before. "I never thought I'd be here," Xenia said softly, breaking the silence. "I never thought I'd find someone like you. I'd spent so many years thinking that I wasn't enough, that my past would always define me. But now I feel like I'm finally becoming the person I was always meant to be." Darius looked down at her, his voice low but filled with sincerity. "You've always been that person, Xenia. You just needed to see it for yourself. And I'm glad I could be the one to help you realize that." Xenia smiled, the warmth of his words wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. "Thank you, Darius, for everything, for believing in me. I'll always believe in you," he said, his tone full of certainty. "And I'll always be her, no matter what comes next." And in that moment, Xenia realized that she had found something truly special. Not just a partnership in work, but a partnership in life. And with Darius by her side, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with strength, with love, and with hope. Xenia woke up early as the soft morning light slipped through the glass walls of the research facility. She sat on her bed for a moment, listening to the peaceful sounds of the colony waking up. Today was an important day. She and Darius were going to present their project to the colony leaders, something that could change the future for both humans and her people. For the first time in a long while, Xenia felt calm. She looked out at the sky, the soft colors of dawn spreading wide, and took a deep breath. Everything had changed since she met Darius. The pain of her past still lived in a small corner of her heart, but now there was hope too. As she got ready, Xenia thought about the long journey that brought her here. All those years of feeling like an outcast, like she was broken, now felt like they had led her to something meaningful. She was no longer just the infertile one that others had whispered about. She was now a scientist who had created something powerful. And she had someone who believed in her, Darius. When she stepped into the lab, Darius was already there, checking the final settings of the communication system they had built together. His face lit up when he saw her. "Good morning, Xenia," he said with a warm smile. "Ready for the big day?" She smiled back, her nervousness fading when she saw him. "As ready as I'll ever be." Darius walked over and gently took her hand for a moment, giving it a soft squeeze. "No matter what happens today, I'm proud of what we've done. And I'm proud of you." Xenia felt her heart swell with emotion. "Thank you, Darius. I couldn't have done it without you." Together, they made their way to the main hall, where the leaders of the colony and several human ambassadors were gathered. The room was large, filled with quiet chatter as everyone waited for the presentation to begin. As Xenia and Darius took their place at the front, the room slowly grew silent. Darius started speaking, explaining the purpose of their project. For too long, misunderstandings have stood between humans and Xenia's people. But today we want to show you that we can go beyond words. We can share emotions, real feelings, and understand each other in ways we never thought possible. Then Xenia took over. Her voice was steady and clear, filled with quiet confidence. "This system isn't just technology. It's a bridge, one that can help us trust each other, help us work together. For those of us who have felt alone, unheard, or unwanted, this is a chance to connect in a new way." As she spoke, she saw many of the leaders listening closely. Some had skeptical looks, but others were clearly moved by her words. When she finished, she glanced at Darius, who nodded encouragingly. Next, they demonstrated the device. Xenia and Darius each wore a small band on their arms, devices they had created to translate feelings into clear signals. As Xenia thought about her hope for peace, a soft, glowing light pulsed on her band and appeared on a screen for all to see. Then Darius shared his feelings of trust and respect, and another light, of a different color, joined hers. Together, the lights blended, showing that their emotions were in harmony. The room was quiet for a long moment, and then soft murmurs began to spread. The leaders were surprised, but many looked impressed. One elder from Xenia's people stood up. She had always been known for her sharp words, but today her face was softer. "I never thought I would see such a thing. For so long, I believed that humans could never understand us. But perhaps I was wrong." Another leader, a human ambassador, added, "If we can truly share feelings like this, maybe we can avoid the conflicts that have divided us for too long." Xenia felt a rush of relief and joy. For so long, she had been searching for a way to belong. And now, in this moment, she felt she had found her place, not only in her work, but in helping her people and humans see a better way forward. When the meeting ended, many people came to speak with her and Darius. Some asked questions about the technology, while others simply thanked them for what they had done. For Xenia, each kind word felt like a piece of her broken heart was being gently mended. Later that evening, when the crowd had left and the sun was setting, Darius and Xenia sat together, or on the same balcony where they had shared so many quiet moments. "You were amazing today," Darius said, looking at her with pride. "So were you," Xenia replied, smiling softly. "I can't believe they listened. I can't believe they actually understood." Darius chuckled. "You made them understand. Your words, your strength. You showed them the truth." Xenia looked out at the sky, the stars beginning to appear. "I never thought I would get here, Darius. I used to think I had no future." Darius took her hand gently. "Well, you have a future now. And if you'll let me, I want to be a part of it." Xenia turned to him, her eyes full of warmth. "I want that too." As they sat there, side by side, watching the stars above, Xenia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The future was still unknown, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid. With Darius beside her, and the work they had done, she knew she had something worth fighting for. And as the night settled over the colony, Xenia realized that sometimes hope comes when you least expect it, and love grows in the places where you once felt empty. A new beginning had arrived, and she was ready to embrace it.